do here is thank everybody for joining us. And also, by the way, forgot to thank Clear. So Clear is actually sponsoring this webinar, and they are a technology company as well. We're going to talk a little bit about membership plans and using that type of technology. So what I would like to do is just play a brief video from Clear, if I can get that to play, and then we'll go from there.
Are you a DSO not using Clear? There are now over 200 DSOs using the Clear platform with automated features that save your staff time to focus on patient care, performance tracking that gives you a look into the impact Clear is having, measure treatment accepted, production, and collections, and ultimately increase your patient loyalty, practice production, and profit. Clear is an easy way to offer subscription-based dental coverage directly to patients, plus reduce your dependence on insurance. Get started today by scanning the QR code.
All right. And we'll, so there's the QR code. If you want to reach out to Clear, we'll have this QR code, and we'll also have the URL accessible so you can reach out and find out more about Clear's membership plan. But we appreciate their sponsorship. Without them sponsoring this webinar, we wouldn't have been able to get these 4 guests on the show. So we're going to talk about technology now. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm going to stop the share, and voila, we have with us 4 DSO executives. We're going to take the next 58 minutes and talk about all things technology. And I'll tell you, it seems like there's a lot out there right now, and I think it can be overwhelming. In fact, that was one of the top questions. How do you kind of navigate through all these different opportunities, and how do you prioritize? So we'll start things off with introductions. Bill Becknell, Mortenson Dental Partners. Bill, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Bill. I'm excited to be here today. Bill Becknell, CEO of Mortenson Dental Partners. We're a 140 practice group across 9 states that we're entirely owned by our doctors and employees. And pleasure to be here today, Bill.
Thanks, Bill. We have Dr. Alex Giannini. You may know him as Dr. G. Hey, Dr. G, how are you?
Good. Thank you. Nice to be here. Appreciate the invite and participating on this panel with you all. Alex Giannini, Aligned Dental Partners. We are a consulting and management company, working with entrepreneurial dentists who are trying to figure out how to go to the next level. We help entrepreneurial dentists basically create the platform, be it help them with their legal, finance, HR, procurement, IT, all the way down the line, marketing. And with there's over 750 offices in the network, so we're quite busy and a growing company. So enjoying being here.
Thanks. And we have Amber Collins. Amber is with Peak Dental Services. Hi, Amber.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here. Apologize if my internet is a little unstable. We've got some weather here in Colorado. So I am with Peak Dental Services. I am the Chief Operating Officer. I've been with the company for 15 years since pretty much inception. We have about 60 locations, and I am the ops lady. I do anything and everything operational for our company.
Thanks, Amber. And last but not least, we have Dave Salciccioli. I always leave him for last because he has the toughest last name. He is with Singing River Dental.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. I'm excited to be here today. Honored to be on the panel. I'm currently serving as the Chief Strategy Officer for a 10-location DSO in Northern Alabama, Singing River Dental Partners, and love guiding strategy around adoption, around technology integration, and digital transformation. So I can't wait to dive into this conversation today.
And what we decided to do is really start things off with some of the technologies that you're using currently at your groups. And then we're going to get into the Q&A. All those questions have come from people that have registered ahead of time. So we tried to prioritize what we thought was the most important. We had a lot of repeat questions. But Dave, since we're focused on you right now, talk about some of the technologies that you're currently using, and maybe there's some that the audience might not be aware of.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I mean, I have the broadest experience as the other three panelists here, but I'll share a couple things that we're using. One platform that has become transformational for us just in an internal workflow management has been Monday.com. So our support organization and all of our initiatives, all of our technology initiatives, like we'll talk about today, and a lot of other support systems we run through Monday.com. And that's a great project management, workflow management process. And would love to chat with any of you about that. We also have built successful in-house labs. So prime scanners to prime mills to prime prints. So the full CRX system. And we're currently producing somewhere between 400 and 450 individual units a month across all of our practices. And that's been a really, really neat technology that we've brought in to continue to grow our in-house lab space. In addition, we've integrated Paylocity as our HRIS platform over the past couple of years, and that's been wildly successful in terms of really optimizing our people operations space. There's some other platforms like Agora, Pulse, and some for marketing and things like that. And then currently in the middle of a Weave implementation as well. And so that represents a few of the tech platforms that we're currently either integrating or working with at the moment.
Thanks, Dave. Amber, how about you? What are you using over at Peak that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, we are constantly looking for new ways to integrate technology to really help push us forward. So we have a ton of different things that we use for a multitude of reasons, some that overlap Dave, and honestly, great platforms. We also use Paylocity. That has been excellent for us for our people management. We do also use different things. We are big on just patient experience. It's extremely important to us, and it's our #1 value as a company. And we currently use Swell, which is an NPS tracking platform. We love to use that. We can also text our patients and just stay in touch with them. It helps integrate with Google as well. We do use Asana, so that's very similar to Monday.com. So we use Asana for all of our project management. As we acquire more and more locations, it's been extremely important for us to stay organized, to get the team collected, and that has been a great platform for us as well. And there's so many more, but in recent months, actually weeks for us, we have just integrated with Pearl AI as well. And so far, I'm extremely excited about that platform. So happy to talk about that, as well as the multitude of other platforms that we use.
Great. Thanks, Amber. Bill, what are you doing over at Mortenson Dental Partners?
Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind instantly, Bill. We use UKG for our HRIS system. We also use Google throughout our architecture and infrastructure. We're not a Microsoft shop, which many people are, so we use the Google ecosystem. We use Dental Robot as a baseline for our centralized insurance verification. Had a lot of success with that. Prime Scan was another common item that was mentioned already today. We are also using CE Zoom as a platform for continuing education for our team members. And last but not least, maybe one of my favorite that we've had for quite some time is Tableau, which is a business intelligence platform that allows us to do a lot of deep dive and analytics about our business and things that are going on. So that would be maybe the top couple that come to mind.
That's great. Thanks, Bill. Dr. G, you mentioned earlier that you work with a lot of smaller groups, right? So you have a lot of consulting clients. You also have your own practices. So talk a little bit about what you recommend for your consulting clients and then what you're using.
Yeah. So yeah, we end up testing different platforms throughout the offices that we own. But last year we implemented on the clinical side. We put all the offices with CVTs. We gave them we put scanners in there, and then integrated Overjet. And so, and that's been really, Overjet's been fantastic. Really helps with communication and trying to close the gap with the doctors and the hygienists as they diagnose and treatment plan. So so that's it on the clinical side. That allowed us to also move to by putting in the CBTs and the scanners. It allowed us to. I was never a big proponent of implementing implant dentistry in the past, just because I was worried about liability and things going south. And but we're using a system called DSO, which basically really has streamlined it, and then with that whole tech stack, we made it much more simpler to deliver for doctors to really deliver on the implant side. So we're using on the business side of things, using on the marketing side, I would say PeerLogic, Google Analytics, and Upswell for reputation management. And then on the revenue cycle side, we've been using Zentist and Remit AI. That's really helped the revenue cycle team. And on the HR side, we just recently switched some of the groups over to Clarity, which is an HR tech platform as well.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is it's great. Everybody's using different things, and I think it's such a broad topic, right? Technology. It's pretty much anything you do. There's some type of hopefully it makes it easier, right? But there's some type of technology solution. So this leads, and Dr. G, we can continue on with you. What technology really has had the greatest impact? If you had to choose one, which one would you think has had the greatest impact on your groups, or your practices, and then your clients' practices?
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention, we also used Dental Intel for, the KPIs, Modento, and so forth. So I would say clearly the one that's had the biggest impact was Overjet. And that'll really it paid for itself very quickly by the time we put in, because you have to upgrade. You got to make sure your tech can handle it. So we have all the practices on a portal on Open Dental, and so making sure that the tech could handle the Overjet, that was super important. There's still things that they're working on to improve it, but I would say the return on that, we saw, most groups on average have about a 2.5% year-over-year growth. We just saw, and this is across the board, we saw 12% really. So it was almost six times above the average. And for some offices, it really made a much bigger difference. So I would say, the clinical helped. Putting that in really made a big difference. Then we've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out the calls and the quality of a lot of phone calls don't get answered. The phones are still the lifeline to the practice, and really you end up losing a lot of money. You spend all this money in terms of marketing and driving patients to the office, and then it all bottlenecks at the phone. And if you don't handle, that's such a critical point. And so by analyzing those phone calls, the missed phone calls, listening to the phone calls, that really has a big impact in terms of increasing new patient flow, and really setting the tone for conversions and getting patients into the practice. So I would say Overjet and what we're doing with PeerLogic is really the two big things that have yielded a fairly good ROI so far.
Bill, how about you? What would you say has the biggest impact?
To me, it kind of all comes back to visibility and awareness on exactly what is happening at the practice. And so that I would give it to the business intelligence tableau, because each of the other individual pieces you have to accurately measure and understand exactly what's happening and what the outcomes are. And that brings it all together to have that visibility. For us, we've been doing that for some time, and really bringing all the practice level data back, putting it in a data lake, and then reporting on that. And that has allowed us to really have the visibility about the changes we make, the impacts of those changes, and really measure outcomes on a very specific level. That is probably one of the biggest impacting items that we've had. And we've had it in place for some time, and it's been wildly beneficial to the business. Of more recent, I would say it would be Dental Robot and our centralized insurance verification, which is also connected really to some proprietary software that we developed in-house that automatically applies payments to claims. This has been very, very impactful for our business as well, both to the patients and teams, both in terms of meaningful work. I think, one of the things that we hear from our teams often is, what is the most challenging part of your job? And it was very much the time that they spent on the phone with insurance trying to verify insurance is just not rewarding and meaningful work. And so by taking that off of our business associates at the practice was very, very meaningful in the quality of work, but also the outcome of the patients.
Great. Thanks, Bill. And actually, a couple of really good questions have come in. So I'm going to put a pin in one of them that relates to Tableau and the data that you're getting back at the practice level. Amber, from Peak's perspective, what do you see that's really impacted your, maybe from the operations side, since that's what you do? Talk a little bit about that from an operation perspective.
Yeah, I think it kind of overlaps what Bill and Dr. G were just talking about. So first of all, yes, you want to make sure that you make data-driven decisions in your business. You're really only as good as your data, and you want to make sure that your data is accurate. And I see a lot of people asking about, well, what KPIs are you tracking, things like that. And it is extremely important. And we talk about technology, and each technology platform is going to track something completely different, right? For example, Dr. G was just talking about the lifeline of your practice is answering your phone. And it's so simple. And I can sit here and say, just pick up the phone. And people will look at me and say, well, yeah, we pick up the phone. But do you actually measure it? That's a KPI, right? And so we use Patient Prism. I love Patient Prism. I think they have been excellent. They have given us a ton of insight into how we're answering the phones, how we're converting those calls, just tons and tons of data. And whether you have, like, we have a call center, it's onshore, but it's full of past office managers, just tons of people that we love working with, and they do, work directly with Patient Prism. But even our office managers and in the field, we're using Patient Prism to really track what's our conversion rate, how many of these new patient leads that are coming in are actually, coming in the door. Like, that really does matter. And what's our answer rate? That's a KPI that, you should be tracking, because you may feel like, I'm picking up the phone a lot. And in the early days, I was here when we had 1-2 practices. I'm like, I'm answering the phone. I know I am. But then you look at the data, and industry average is you're typically answering anywhere from 50 to 60% of your phone calls. That's 50 to 40% of your patients that are calling, they want to get in, and you're not answering that call. So I would say Patient Prism is a big one. To Bill's point, we actually use Power BI. That took a long time for us to actually get up, integrated, put together dashboards where we're really tracking the KPIs that I think are most important. And we can go into that. That's like almost a whole entire different discussion of the KPIs that you can track and things like that. But each platform that you use, I do believe, kind of tracks something a little bit different. For us, we're early days in the Pearl AI integration, which is very similar to Overjet. So I don't actually have, hey, we've grown 12% like Dr. G in our same store sales or anything like that. But what you can track in a KPI, you can track through that, is what are your dollars per visit? What are your doctors doing, as a dollars per visit KPI, or just different things. And so again, I could go down a rabbit hole on all of these things, but I would say for me, it's probably Patient Prism, Power BI, From an ops perspective, we use a system called Revenue Well, which is patient communication. You can send out campaigns to those patients. It helps with confirmation calls. Again, you want to make sure if you've answered the phone and scheduled the patient, they actually come into the practice. How are you confirming those appointments to make sure that the patient actually shows up? So there's a ton of different great things that we can use to boost our practice.
Dave, how about you and Singing River? I have a suspicion I know what you're going to say, but go ahead and
Well, you're right, Amber and Bill, you're talking about KPIs, and that's another hour webinar to really look at the key stakeholders that drive the business. So you've got financial KPIs, you've got operational KPIs, you've got hygiene KPIs, doctor KPIs, and each of those subgroups, you can have hundreds of different KPIs that you could track, all pouring in from these different platforms. But what I like that you said, Amber, is it's all about making data-driven decisions. There's lots of people who track a lot of data. It doesn't necessarily impact their decision-making. So that's more on a leadership, organizational perspective to develop a culture where you are reviewing data regularly and you're making decisions around it. So that's just my pin on a little bit of nuance around those KPIs and using them organizationally. So yeah, the two that I've mentioned previous, I think have really had an impact. On the clinical side, it really has been bringing in these prime scans into our practice and moving full digital, and then building the systems both through Monday and through that to be able to build this internal Crown Lab that we have. And so we've been able to train up through our partners some incredible techs who, and we use Monday for a ticketing system, go straight to our techs and they're designing, and then we've got couriers who are delivering, and that has significantly driven up our production within the practice because we can do same day crowns within those practices, and also driven down our costs for using our outside labs. So that's been about a 3-year journey there. And as we step into the 3D printing side, I'm excited to see how that continues to transform what we can do for patient experience, in addition to the cost savings that are on the lab side for us as an org. And then certainly Monday.com has been probably one of our bigger transformations in terms of creating a work culture that is high transparency, focused on execution, and high visibility into what's happening across the org. And so there's many processes that we manage through that, but essentially we've created dashboards that are specific to each practice where if they need to submit an expense report or a purchase request or mileage, all of these different processes, we've made a really simple and easy support platform for them to have access to our internal support team, so that we don't drop the ball on those things. And so lots of different forms and ways at the practice level they can input that data. And then the Monday really holds our support team accountable for, the more that we can provide and support and care for those practices, they can then turn and solely focus on taking care of the patients. And so that's been a great platform for us to build out over the past couple of years.
So next question we have here, and we've got some really good ones coming in live here. So we'll try and get to some of those as well. But one that was sent in earlier when someone registered, we just really covered this, right? There are so many different technologies, so many different options out there. So Bill, we can start with you. How do you prioritize, and then what's the evaluation process look like?
Yeah, so Bill, this is a fantastic question. Really, it is. And it's a multifaceted answer. We like to start with looking at what is the impact to the stakeholders. And so we'll look at the patient perspective, we'll look at the provider perspective, the practice, i.e. the operational implications of that. And then we'll also look at the technology itself and how commonplace is it in the market? Is this something that is on kind of the front side of the maturity path? Is it in the middle, or is it a developing, emerging technology? We'll also look at the confidence we have in regulatory activity around this technology. Is it so new and so cutting edge that you don't really know where this is going to go and how things are going to unfold in the future? Then lastly, we'll look at return. And when you think about return, the first thing that pops in mind is your return on investment but we also look on our return on effort. How difficult is this going to be put in place? How excited is the team going to be to have this tool and technology in their practice? Or is it something that are going to be a little bit standoffish to use and therefore a little bit difficult implementation? We'll think about those considerations, and then we'll use the business intelligence data to put some pilots in place, and we'll see how they go. If they come in where we expect them to, or not as good as we expect them to, or better than we expect them to. And that kind of gives you the confidence to pick which technologies you want to get behind and promote inside the business. So I know there's a lot of pieces to that. Happy to expand on any of them, but there's a lot of decision going into picking what you chase, because as you mentioned, there are so many options out there. It's easy to chase too many things and be ineffective at many things.
And Bill, how does when these, I don't know if they come in as requests, how do they find out about this technology? Is coming in from clinicians, ops people, kind of, I'm sure it's probably coming in from a lot of different directions. And do you make the decision by committee?
So it does come in various ways. Obviously, we have vendor supplier partners bringing us opportunities. We have clinicians. We have a board-directed clinical committee made up of about 80 of our practicing clinicians that are on various clinical subcommittees that help us identify technologies and think about what to implement. But the one that has been, all those are kind of expected and normal. The one that is most exciting is we survey our team members every quarter. And part of that survey says, what can we do to make your job easier? And what is the most difficult part of your job? And this is going to sound too easy, but just listen. They'll tell you what they need to be successful. And so we go through as a leadership team through all of those things, and we find the themes and we try to solve the problems so they can better focus their attention on the patients and take care of our communities. And that has really created a lot of great results for us. But ideas, to your point, could come in any of those channels.
Great. Dr. G, how about you? I mean, you kind of have a unique situation going on because you have consulting clients that are probably doing all sorts of different things, each practice doing things differently. And
Right.
then you've got your own practices. So, how do you really prioritize what technologies, you either recommend to your consulting clients or bring into your DSO?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's always about raising the standard, either raising the standard of care clinically or raising the standard of care through, or the standard, the business and the admin standards. And similar to what Bill said here a minute ago is, we're wanting to do what's in the best interest of the patients, and at the same time, how do we support the teams, from being, more efficient and more productive, right, and happier. So I can tell you though that what Bill said is dead on. I've always had this idea that we had a process always in place, and the one time that I deviated from it, it really bit me. What I'm talking about, I'm not going to talk about who there was, but there was a company that sold us on a piece of technology, and so I went with one office as a test, and really thought it was a good test, and then implemented it across 14 offices at a cost of what, $200,000, and it was a magnificent failure, right? And so it was like, so figuring out how to roll out your technology is super important as well. You can have a great piece of, I see that all the time. We have great software, in terms of communication and especially at the home office support level, and it doesn't get utilized, right? It doesn't get utilized because it wasn't properly rolled out. There was no, there was no training, there was no support, and so you've got, and I see that a lot with CEREC machines. I walk into the dental office and a CEREC machine is sitting there, used as a coat hanger. It just it's a struggle it's a struggle in terms of using it and rolling it out. And so the other thing is, you're going to spend all this money and invest in it, you better use it, right? And don't let it sit there and just collect dust or be some expensive art that you really don't really appreciate, you know. So
yeah, Dr. G, I love that you're bringing this up around barriers to change, and this was one of the questions that came up, and I'd love to discuss that for a minute. You know, there's a couple things that come to mind for me from this perspective. You know, one of them being, like you brought up, what's your organization's level of actually being able to plan and execute and lead change within the organization? Because I think our teams can get fatigued when it's like, what's the flavor of the month? What's the new thing that we're gonna, you know, get all excited about, shiny object, and then we never really fully execute it all the way to adoption. We do a bunch of pilots with platforms, and then none of them really have the impact that we were hoping for when we initially set out. So I think there's a real skill to develop as a leadership team in really thinking through, you know, how well do we execute? How do we plan? How do we engage a deep level of stakeholders? How do we get people excited about it and on our team linking arms with us, wanting to implement that technology? And then how do we drive that through? You know, another piece, though, is that oftentimes these technologies require behavioral change for our team members, and everybody comes to change with a different level of, you know, rah, I'm green light, I'm ready to go. And then we've got some people who are yellows and red lights, right, in terms of how they address change. And so I think we have to understand that human behavioral component, from my perspective, that comes into guiding and leading change and adoption around these technologies. One thing that I'm excited about in the space is that it seems like there's more of a focus on interoperability between all of these technologies, because I think our teams can just frankly get platform fatigue. Like, I got to go to 12 different platforms in my day to do the work and do it effectively. And so I hope that there's continued push in this space and with vendors that they're learning to work together and working more seamlessly with our practice management systems, because I think that can be a barrier to change too. It's just fatigue from our teams having too many platforms that they've got to learn and understand and integrate. So a couple of things that come to mind for me in terms of leading change and barriers, I think, that get in the way of full adoption as we bring in these platforms.
A great point. Amber, I don't know if you have anything to add there, or we can move on to the next question, which is actually for you, Amber.
Yeah, well, really quickly, couldn't agree more with you, Dave. Just operationally, knowing what you can handle is probably one of the biggest barriers, right? You have to make sure that you have a really solid plan for integration, and you have to make sure that it's not too much all at once, right? Because you don't want to put patient care to the side. You don't want to put anything that's really at the forefront of your business aside to integrate this shiny new, piece of technology. So couldn't agree more. You said it perfectly. So not a whole lot to add there.
So on the patient coverage side of things, economy certainly shifted in the past couple of years, and you hear about layoffs. So we know that really patients come to practices if they have dental insurance. And if they don't, there's a good chance that they're going to put off treatment, or they may not come at all. So that's where, I think it's really interesting that there are these different membership plan opportunities out there. And it's done through a technology platform where you can customize things. So maybe talk a little bit about how Peak Dental Services is using a membership plan, and how that's, how effective or not effective that's been.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually coincidental, honestly, but we use Clear. And we do have a membership plan that we run for all of our patients through there. Again, it's customizable. You can call it whatever you want. You can choose your options, whatever you want, but ours is called Gloss Dental Membership Plan. And what's excellent about it is not only does it bring patients in the door that don't have dental insurance, because they're getting, depending on the plan that you choose, what you want to offer your patients. For us specifically, we do the free, we say free, but no out-of-pocket portion for our patients for their cleaning, exam and x-rays every 6 months. And then they get a discount on any service that we do in the practice. So for them, what that does is it makes it affordable. It brings the patient into the door. If they don't have insurance, they can still take care of their necessary cleanings every 6 months. And then it provides our providers with more treatment to do, right? You've got patients coming in the door. They most likely are going to need treatment. And if they're not coming in the door for their cleanings, that treatment opportunity is not there. Not only that, but it really does help with patient case acceptance. So when you bring in a fee-for-service patient and you're mainly an insurance accepting practice, which we are, all of our practices accept most insurances, the patient is going to say, hey, a barrier to moving forward with my treatment is I can't afford it. Affordability is a big piece. So when they're signing up for these membership plans, or we're offering it in office that, hey, listen, these are the great benefits of it. It's, a certain dollar amount per year or per month. It's very affordable. And you get a 20 to 50% discount on everything that we do in the practice. Instantly, that patient, we've removed that barrier. They feel like, hey, that affordability piece is possibly there. There's other things you can do with affordability, but at least from a perspective of a patient coming in, they don't have insurance. They're not really sure what they can do, what their options are. Working with Clear has been instrumental in our practices. And we typically average, just to give everyone, I know everybody always wants numbers, and we withhold information sometimes, but we sign up anywhere from 500 to 750 patients a month on our plans. So it is a big number and it is very effective in our practices.
Anybody else want to chime in on membership plans? Or are you all using something, or do you have anything? Does anybody have any in-house membership plans, perhaps, that maybe they're not using somebody else?
Yes, Bill, we do. We call it our Smiles 360 plan. It's very similar to what Amber described. And I would tell you it is very helpful in the patients that don't have dental insurance, and would strongly propose that you have some type of solution for patients that don't have insurance because they need care, they need treatment. And this can certainly help it make it more affordable for them and bring them back into constant care through cleanings and that type of thing, which, obviously improves their overall ongoing oral health. So those are very, very effective plans. That's been very successful for us as well.
Dave?
Yeah, Bill, we have our own Healthy Smiles protection plan. Sounds very similar in terms of how this is being administrated. We've just always done it in-house. It hasn't been to the scale where we've brought in a platform around it yet, but continue to sell it in-house. What's kind of interesting is we do see some patients who are even on dental insurance also buying a membership plan and kind of engaging on that. And we've done some different things to allow for other services like cleaning or otherwise, whitening or otherwise, that they could do through membership plans. And then we also have multi-specialty because we have 3 pediatric practices. And so we will have whole families also engage in that for kids or otherwise. So yeah, it's been a really good piece for us. But speaking of initiatives, it's one of those initiatives that we're hoping to grow this year as we integrate some other platforms. So something that we're currently vetting and looking at.
That's great. You know what? I'm going to jump. So we have a lot of questions that have come in that we are absolutely not going to get a chance to answer live, but we will make notes and try and respond to everybody. There are a couple anonymous ones in here, so that might be tough, but the ones that aren't anonymous, we can certainly reach out. And I'm going to change the order here on some of the questions that we had, because as we're running out of time, which we always do, which is a good thing because we're diving deep. This question did come in live, and it's something that we were going to get to later on, but I don't think we're going to have time. It's wrapped around cybersecurity, and I think this is like one of those topics that it'd be remiss if we didn't mention that here. So let's Bill, why don't we start with you? Talk a little bit about what Mortenson's doing from a cybersecurity perspective. We've seen all you have to do is look at the news every single day. Some big corporation has some type of breach. There's a ransomware attack. It happens to everybody, it seems. So what are you doing at Mortenson, Bill?
So we are trying to approach this on several different fronts. It is something that we spend a lot of time on it. I would tell you that we had our board of directors in for a special training around cybersecurity about 18 months ago, where we had someone from the outside come in and talk about the different elements of cybersecurity, what should be put in place, those types of things. And that was very productive for us. I think as our doctors, who are also owners, see all of this stuff in the news, they're very, very interested in how are we protecting our company with this. So there is a lot of activity around this. So we are doing obviously some very basic stuff such as email screening, that we have a platform that kind of looks at all emails coming in. Who are they from? Does this look like a verified sender? What's the attachment look like? Those types of things. We also have monitoring services that monitor the attacks on our network. And I would tell you, after the Aspen breach last year, that the attacks on our network went up 700%, because clearly in the hacking community, the antennas went up. Oh, Aspen's been breached. Dental might be easy. Let's focus on dental. And you could just see it instantly go up on the number of attacks that we had on our network. We also look at a service that looks at all of our hardware and whether we are running the most current firmware applications on all of our routers and our networks and our servers, to make sure that there's patches out there, that they've been applied and updated, because often these hackers get entrenched in finding a hole in your router that they can get in through, and you don't know about it, and then all of a sudden you're breached. We're also doing a lot with our personnel to train them about what they should do and what they should not do, both at work and at home, for their own best interests. Cybersecurity is as much about social engineering as it is anything else. All they have to do is click on the wrong attachment, open the wrong link, find a USB drive in the parking lot and plug it into a PC, and you're breached. And so we do a lot of training with our team members around these types of things to make them aware of what they need to do to help keep our network safe. So that would be the short, off the cuff version. I think this probably does warrant more discussion in almost an entire session at some point. And our VP of IT would be happy to participate in that, because we have done a lot here.
I think that is a great suggestion. That there's probably over an hour's worth of a discussion for sure, just wrapped around cybersecurity. Does anybody else, Dave, do you have anything you'd like to add? And looks like Dr. G does as well.
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. G. No, I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, no. So obviously, we've seen some of our client offices. Certainly, the amount of hacks have gone up. But recently, we've installed. Our CIO's been installed software called MDR, which is it's an AI. They used to manually watch all these things, but now this software is running in the background, and they just installed it like 2 weeks ago, and they are thoroughly shocked. Our CIO and the techs are all just shocked as to really how much is going on. So so great piece of software called MDR.
MDR. Okay, Dave.
Yeah, I was going to mention that one, Bill. There are some great groups out there, Black Talon, Sentinel One. There's different platforms that are there to help you strategically think about how you ensure your network. There are some things you can do just even on the hardware side in terms of, are you all cloud for your PMS, or do you have on-prem servers and locations there, firewall set up, things like that. But the only piece I was going to say is, to your point, Bill, it's unless you're looking at the data and unless you have something monitoring that, it's sort of a silent killer. You may be sitting here like, no, I don't think anybody would go after us. We're not a big fish in the pond here. But you'd be surprised at how much is happening in the background, like these guys are saying, that we would have no idea. So it's still something we're learning about and going to continue to invest time in. But it's not something that I don't think, even if you're a single practice or a couple of locations, that you can just say, Well, we'll get to that when we're X amount of size, because I think this will continue to ramp up. And certainly you go from, you go from the Aspen to Henry Schein to Change. The radars are up for what's happening in dental and medical at large. And so I think it's something that we have to be vigilant about moving forward.
Amber,
Yeah,
do you have
point. Sorry, I
anything?
just want to add
Good.
that I think it's easy to look at some of these companies and think they weren't doing what they were supposed to. These are great organizations. I guarantee they had an aggressive plan around cybersecurity. It's just that difficult. So sorry, Bill, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I was just going to ask Amber if she had anything she wanted to add.
No, I just echo honestly all of the platforms that you guys mentioned, and then Bill's overall sentiment of just making sure that it's a priority. You're training your teams on it, what to do, what not to do. Again, it is something that is obviously at the top of everybody's mind, but just making sure that you're taking action and implementation, most important things.
And we've actually thought it's a big enough deal to do a monthly column called Dental Cyber Watch. I mean, there's so much. What we noticed was there were just so much in the news, whether it's affecting single practices or, some of the bigger groups. There is enough to cover, and I think it's just changing so rapidly, just like all technology. And I think that's probably, that was one of the questions. How do you keep up with it? I think the other one is, and we'll get to the bill yet another point.
Yeah, I just looked it up, what the instructor for our board and assigned us a book to read before the cybersecurity training. And I wanted to share it with the group. And the book is, it was an easy read, and it was very much in layman's terms. And it's called Secure Enough, ? 20 questions around cybersecurity for business owners and executives. And it was a great read. Would highly recommend that to anybody interested in learning more about that. Thanks, Bill.
Great. Secure Enough.
Secure Enough.
Okay, great. So let's talk about this. This came up in one of the questions, and we have about 12 minutes left. So I'm just trying to prioritize here. Let's go with ROI. So how are we measuring that? When it comes to technology, why don't we start with you, Amber?
Sure. So I kind of mentioned before, and I know I've mentioned Pearl quite a bit. There's so many other technologies out there than Pearl, as we've been mentioning, but one that's a great one to bring up in this subject of ROI is just if you're going to integrate this huge, platform to all of your locations, how are you going to make sure that it's actually successful? How are you going to measure that this big investment that you've made in training, implementation, all of that is actually working? And there are several different things. And I think that it goes back to kind of our KPI discussion, which is, what are you wanting to see? What are you wanting to track? And is this going to bring the results that you were looking for? And so ROI, I mean, it can be really anything that you're looking for, right? And so for us personally, when we think about Pearl, we are wanting to make sure that we are not letting treatment that patients actually need walk out the door. And so whether that's, dollars per visit, that's same store sales, that's going to be our ROI. That's going to tell us, is this actually working? Are we increasing the amount of treatment that we're doing in the practices? Again, this isn't treatment that patients don't need. This is treatment that patients are coming in, they're in need of, and we are letting walk out the door. So how do we close that gap? How do we make sure that we are optimizing what our providers are actually offering to our patients? And Pearl is just a great example for this conversation. There's so many other things that you can say, oh, well, what's the ROI for this? It's just Pearl is easy because it's mainly about, are we scheduling and completing the dentistry that's necessary for our patients? It also is a good platform for making sure that we are providing the right type of treatment for our patients. Are we being overly conservative? Are we being overly aggressive? And there's nobody that can really say that except for the doctor, right? They're going to be the ones to say, this is the treatment that's necessary for the patients. But when you have Pearl or a platform similar to Pearl, you kind of have, 10,000 doctors all put into AI saying, this would be kind of what we think is recommended. So with that said, it kind of gives a layer of confidence so that we can push forward as far as the treatment goes. And again, as far as ROI goes, if that's what you're looking for, or whatever the platform you're using, what are you looking for? What do you want to get out of it? And then measuring it appropriately. So again, I just use Pearl as an example for us.
Does anybody else want to talk a little bit about measuring ROI? I know, Bill, you touched on it earlier, but I don't know, Dave or Dr. G.
Yeah, there's two other additional questions I'd add here, maybe process. One of them is when we're looking at these new technologies, before we even decide to do a pilot, there's kind of a question that I ask our team: is it a whoa, balloons? I don't know how those just came up. I guess it's recognizing my hand gestures. Is it going to be a revolution on our current processes, or is it going to be an evolution? And that goes to your point, Bill, around kind of return on effort. If we know that the cost benefit analysis that we've done is going to have really clear results on the patient experience, or on patient treatment, or on just the experience as a team member. You talked about insurance verification, things like that. And it needs to be a revolutionary process, great. But we just need to recognize that that's going to have a lot more heavy lifting in terms of building that strategy and executing that type of plan. But there are lots of ways that we can evolve our processes that aren't as much of a heavy lift, and a lot of that comes to behavioral change. And then I just mentioned really doing a cost benefit analysis, which is what Amber's talking about here. Be really clear on what are the key KPIs that we're actually trying to move, set goals for those, and make sure that you actually come after action in that, after you've implemented that, and say, was it successful or not? And look at those same metrics, know that you can measure those. So those are a few of the questions that I try to ask when we're framing out these implementation processes.
I
Dr.
think it's
G?
a really good comment. I might add just a couple things specifically around suppliers or your partners can be very helpful in identifying the elements of an ROI. But much like Dave and Amber said, just reiterate that it's important of what actually happens operationally to the ROI that you get, not what is predicted to come or what might come. And oftentimes when we do our own internal ROIs, we find a big difference between where the rubber meets the road versus conceptually what might happen. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Bill.
No, that's great. That's what we want to hear. This is one that comes up quite a bit. Are you standardized across all locations with your practice management software? So Amber shaking her head, yes. Yes. So when you're acquiring, that obviously isn't the case. So how does that? How do you make the change when that happens?
Yeah. We use, just so that you guys know, we use Denticon. It's a cloud-based platform. We used to use Dentrix, and we had a server in every single location. And at that point in time, when we'd acquire a location, they may have EagleSoft or another platform. We would then get another server, convert them to Dentrix, and then we would literally, we have a ton of centralized services, which not everybody does. But for example, a call center, we're then literally logging into each remote server to try to look up their schedule. And so for us, it was very important that, well, that doesn't even really solve the problem of being on the same platform, right? It's creating as many barriers. Maybe the training barrier is gone because it's all the same platform. It's all Dentrix, as opposed to having to know how each software works, but it didn't really solve the problem. So about maybe 3 years ago, we moved to a cloud-based platform. And so when we acquire a practice, absolutely, if they have a different PMS, we will move them to Denticon as soon as possible. So most of our integration plan, and again, we use Asana to, track our integration and make sure that we're doing everything in a timely manner, holding everybody accountable. We will do all of this within 90 days of acquisition. So typically the first thing to happen is the software. That's the first thing that we're looking at, because we can't actually integrate our accounts receivable team. We can't integrate our call center, and nothing really, at least the way that we operate, works until we're on that same platform. So we do it very quickly.
Great. what I'm going to do, because we're at about 4 minutes before the top of the hour here, I wanted to make sure that we had everybody's contact information up in case anyone had any questions. So how about we do this? Final thoughts. I know Dave really wanted to talk a little bit about workflow and how they use Monday. And I don't know if we're going to get to be able to do that right now, but final thoughts, Dave. We'll
Okay.
kind of go through everybody, maybe a minute or so on final thoughts. Start with you, Dave.
Yeah, it's been a great discussion. I think that we have identified that there's hours of other topics here around elements of this technology piece. What I would say is, there is a multitude of platforms out there, and someone asked you, or one of the questions was around prioritizing, and that's why I love these discussions. And then creating ties with other organizations out there, like organizations, and asking them, well, what are you doing for this, and what's your experience been? So I guess my final thoughts would be around this is, like, as you are vetting and really thinking through ROI and all that, build some relationships with other people in the industry, other practices, other smaller emerging groups, whatever your size is, and start having those questions, because it's great to see what someone else's experience has been with that platform. You just spoke to it, Bill, that some of these platforms will sell you on a projected ROI. And I really want to know what's the actual ROI when that group has integrated it, and what's their experience been from the return on the energy on it. How heavy of a lift was it? So my final thoughts are just continue that conversation and build ties with people like in this webinar or other like groups, and really learn from them as you're doing your vetting process.
Thanks, Dave. Amber.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't echo Dave's sentiment more. I would just say that prioritizing based on the needs of your practice and making data-driven decisions is going to be the best thing that you can do. So if you are using data to make those decisions and you say, hey, this is an area that we really want to work on, think about what technology is going to help get you there, what's going to get you the results that you're looking for. And I think that that would be the best way, in my mind, to prioritize what do you do next? What's the next step?
Dr. G.
So remember that as much as we like to use technology, it's a tool, and so the phone to me is one of the biggest killers that we've had to the dental practice. And what I mean by that is that remember, we're in the human business, right? We can't use technology to hide behind it. You can't text your patients treatment plans and talk to them that way. Sitting with a patient eye to eye, knee to knee, use the technology as a tool to effectively communicate, and not use it as a weapon, or use it to substitute your inability not to communicate or build relationships with patients. So that's my biggest advice.
Great point.
Thanks, Dr. G. Bill.
No, I would agree with everything that's been said. I think that oftentimes, and Amber spoke a little bit to this, you can align on the technology, but you also have to align on the usage around it. So even though you might be on the same platform or using the same technology or the same AI, the way individuals use it has to be similar. Otherwise, you're still going to get varied outcomes and not have consistent execution of that technology. And oftentimes that piece can be missed. So that would be what I would add, Bill.
That's great. Well, we appreciate it. We are right at the top of the hour, so that worked out well. Had the email addresses up for a little bit. I'll put those in the follow-up email that we send out. Thank you, Amber, Dave, Dr. G, and Bill for joining the DSO Study Club. This was a lot of fun. I had last question that came in is, can we do a part 2 focused on clinical technology and successful pilots? Yeah, we definitely need a part 2 for sure. So yes, we can do that. So thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. And until next time, this is Group Dentistry Now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.